अगर आपको फिल्म्स, बुक्स और पोएट्री डिस्कस करने में इंटरेस्ट है, देन डू कंसिडर बिकमिंग एन एब्स्ट्रैक्ट मेंबर. आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में सारी लिंक्स मिल जाएगी एंड आई होप टू सी यू देयर. सो द वीडियो you're about to watch is our discussion on महाभारत अनरेवल्ड. ये बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग बुक है बिकॉज इसमें काफ़ी सारी छोटी छोटी इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरीज़ के बारे में बात हुई है महाभारत की, जो हम लोग मेन स्ट्रीम में काफ़ी बार उसकी बात नहीं करते हैं. And the entire month when we read this book and discussed it amongst ourselves, we shared our experience while reading these stories. We shared different stories that we had grown up listening. And ये बहुत ही wholesome month रहा था हमारे लिए जब हमने ये book पढ़ी थी. So I really hope this conversation gives you an insight into what all we discussed, and I hope this also encourages you to pick up this book.
If people don't know, I am a mythologist myself, so I am very inherently interested about people's opinion about mythology, and that is why the first question: what is your opinion about mythology, or what do you think of mythology? Do you think of them as stories? Have you considered them important in your life? Are they history to you? What sort of interest do you have in mythology?
So yeah, they are just stories for me, but stories from which we can learn a lot. There is no religious angle involved with those stories, for me at least, and I look at them like that only. And that's a huge world, and the name suggests that it's a collection of myths. That's why it's a mythology. So that's what it is for me. No, like I don't get offended if anybody has a certain say in that story or they have some other perspective. That's totally okay for me. We can interpret them as we want.
Perfect start. And I feel, yeah, that's a huge aspect in listening to these stories, learning about these stories, that you keep an open mind.
Yeah.
You have multiple beliefs situated
Yes.
in these systems.
Even I got introduced to mythology from my mother. So I've been hearing Mahabharata stories and Ramayana stories right from my childhood, early childhood. And for me, again, mythology is just a set of stories. But I believe the interesting thing about mythology is that you can interpret it in so many ways. You can learn a lot. There are life lessons it gives you. So I suppose they're just stories meant to teach you something. Whether we learn from it or not, I mean, that's for that's an individual perspective. But I feel multiple authors and even multiple readers can have so many different interpretations of a single story, like even in the Mahabharata, if we see. So that's what makes mythology interesting for me, learning what what everyone else has interpreted. That's my take.
Yeah, perfect. That is very interesting. And with the time it has passed, there are so many interpretations, so many versions, so many even retellings, for that matter. You have the boom of retelling mythological fiction since 2010, and so many people have written about so many things, so many aspects of the same one novel. And yes, you can call it a book. It's a scripture, it's a text, it's a book, anything. So it's very interesting, and it's how vast it is for anyone to interpret it so differently each time is what's interesting about it. But yeah, what did you think of the book, and what new things did you learn about Mahabharata through this book?
I couldn't finish the whole book, but the Karna's angle that they mentioned about. So everywhere I have read that, there was a lot of injustice that happened with Karna, and since childhood, he faced a lot of difficulties. But book में उन्होंने ऐसा कुछ mention नहीं किया, even when he went to Dronacharya, Dronacharya did teach him a lot of things, and then he went to Parshuram and other incidences as well. So that was quite interesting to me. And I just read like not even half of the book, but from book, I knew that there were only the facts, there were just bullet points that they mentioned the story in that way. But I actually expected a story to be told in some different way, maybe. That's what I was expecting. But in a way, it was a fast read, like you could just go and read on about it. The Karna's angle was quite, which stuck with me, like, okay, this is something different. Someone else is telling a different story here.
So about the book, I finished the entire book, and looking at the title, I was expecting unraveling things about Mahabharata, but I was a little disappointed. There wasn't much unraveling in the book, to be honest. There were some parts of the book I really enjoyed. My favorite part was the first chapter itself about dharma. I think that has something which has always been, questioned, like what exactly is dharma, and then what should we prioritize and according to the circumstances, etc. There were a few stories or parts of the stories which are new to me, but in complete sense, like there was not much unraveling of Mahabharata. Maybe because it was already a part of my curriculum while growing up in school.
About the book, I'm not too happy with the book, to be honest. It was pretty repetitive. Um, the sort of incidents that the author has pointed out to, uh, I think it could have been probably written in a more concise manner. Uh, I mean, like Abhir said, there was no unraveling as such because most facts were known. Probably it would interest someone who hasn't ever read the Mahabharata or hasn't seen it on TV, maybe. It's an epic which is replete with irony. It's just so ironic that a book which bases dharma as its core principle, that you must have these morals, these values, they must be followed uh, at the cost of your life. The characters in that epic, they twist those morals and principles to their own advantage in such a way that it's almost nihilistic, that these morals really don't have any point. It's so twisted. So you say that this is dharma, but then at the end you twist it and use it to your own advantage, which happens even today. So I feel it's a good read if you want to um, compare what's happening currently around us. And these epics go on to tell you, that like even with the Gita, which is also part of the Mahabharata, that some things will happen in a cyclical fashion. Maybe we can just read these to learn and maybe not repeat similar mistakes.
A lot of people, although don't know, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of charts and names and numbers and everything. So I believe that that's something that people might not know at the top of their heads. So that's a good introduction or addition to the book already. And the author also explains a bit about, as you said, the dharma. You have explanations about the kind of marriages, the types of marriages, the kinds of regions and kings and everything. So you have that information, which is something not a lot of people know. Mahabharata as a whole is only seen as this story about Kauravas and Pandavas. So um, it sort of widens the scope of the story for the general audience, I believe.
Like in mythology, now this is the story written by Vyas. And then in South India, the Kalidas has written some other version of the same story. And in Northeast also someone else has written some other version of the story. So does it happen in literature as normally that people write different perspective of the same story? Or is it the only case with Ramayana and Mahabharata that these people wrote the same story with different perspective, or just they were writing it at the same time? I just want to know about that. Yeah.
It starts, we had the oral tradition. We have always had stories told orally to other people. And not just stories, we were also taught orally. So if you understand, if you know the texts, Upanishad literally means upa, that is near, nishad, sitting. So someone who's sitting near you and teaching you by other treaties known as Upanishad. So that is something that is that how, if you were to compare it to today's teaching method, you would say one-on-one method. So people would be taught one-on-one, and that is why they're called Upanishads. So these stories started as oral tradition. Then somewhere around time, these were written down. Now you have the in mythological explanation, that is, Vyasa composed the whole poem, and Ganesh wrote down the entire thing. That is how you know the story. But if we were to see historically, by that time there would be no writing method, and historically you have certain regions, certain kings who have commissioned writings, and with time there have been different writers who have interpreted them differently. You have over 300 versions of the Ramayana written by different authors. You know the Valmiki Ramayana, you know the Ramacharitamanus by Tulsidas. There is a Puranic Ramayana called Adhyatma Ramayana. There is even a Islamic version of Ramayana. It's called Mappala Ramayana. It is written um, by the people of the region Mappala in Kerala. And you have Ram and Lakshman, everyone reading namaz, or offering namaz instead of doing puja, doing yajna. The main story remains the same, and then you have these cultural appropriations. So throughout time there have been different authors who have written down their own interpretations, and we today we consider, yes, there's also a Jain version of Ramayana. In Jain version of Ramayana, I believe it's Lakshman who kills Ravan, because in Jain beliefs, killing is basically a forbidden act. So yeah, that is how you have. Then there is a version, I believe it's Adhyatma Ramayana, where Sita kills Sahasra Ravan, who's a far greater threat than Ravan himself. So you have these versions, you have these changes in every version, and it doesn't limit itself to Ramayana and Mahabharata. You have Puranic stories which are differently told in different Purans. You have different demons being killed by different gods. If there is a demon that is being killed by Vishnu in the Vaishnav, you have that demon being killed by Shiva in the Shiva Purana. I'm sorry. So these versions exist, and these versions come to us through time. And who knows, with a certain time, today's modern versions, today's modern retellings might also be a part of these multiple retellings. And so that's about it. I hope that answers the question. Has your perception changed for any character or event after reading this book? You have these set of characters that you know of, and that you have a certain perceptions about them. Like you said about Karna, he's portrayed as this huge donor, someone who's extremely what do you say, ostracized in a sense, and there are things about him. There's an interesting fact, if you want to know. This portrayal of Karna comes majorly through this of Karna's life, and it's called Mrityunjay by Shivaji Sawant.
Yeah.
Where he is given this beautiful description of Karna's life. But Karna in the epic as such was not at all that holy kind of a person that he's often portrayed as.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's a very interesting change, and you can see in real time how mythology within 30-40 years now. The book Mrityunjay came out in 90s somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and with that you just have a sudden change in the entire personality of Karna.
I too have this perception of Karna as somebody who suffered a lot of injustice. Uh, also Mrityunjay is just one part of it, but also I think I had read another interpretation of the Mahabharata by Anand Neelkantan. It's called The Rise of Kali. Parts. It's in two parts. So in that, the Mahabharata is written from the perspective of the Kauravas. So I believe, like most of history, it's always written from the victor's point of view. So whoever is the winner is shown in a good light, and whoever loses is mostly shown as, it's just a black and white character. There's just no grays at all. um, Karna, I feel like he has been a pretty misunderstood character. um, a lot of people, I mean, Shivaji Savant is of course famous because of Mrityunjay, but if any one of you has read Ramdhari Singh Dinkar's Rashmi Rathi, even that is that's a poem. It's a pretty descriptive, huge poem about the life of Karna. Uh, I would urge you to read it if you haven't. But even, I mean, there's something in that character that inspires so many authors to write about. I feel, yes, he was misunderstood to some extent, but then, he shows good examples of being a true friend, being true to his dharma, everything. I felt it was okay because Duryodhan supported him at a time when everyone shunned him. But then he did this one thing which I feel was, it goes against everything that good that he did, was take part in the disrobing of Draupadi. So whatever be his loyalties, wherever his loyalties lie with Duryodhan as a friend, but maybe as a friend he could have guided him in the right direction, that maybe he should just stop at a certain point. He was maybe just so blinded by this devotion, I would say, to Duryodhan, that he overlooked everything. And he was also, I think, blinded by this, that he wanted to revenge against Arjun, some hint of jealousy that pushed him over the edge. Otherwise, I think, yeah, ego, like Abir said, true. So I think, I mean, my perception hasn't changed completely, but yeah, I feel like in my childhood, when my mother used to tell me those stories, Karna was always the bad guy. But then she herself introduced me to Mrityunjay, which, you know, it's complicated talking about Karna.
I also wanted to talk about how Draupadi's character has been portrayed so far. You first thing is obviously the first thing that if you remember about Draupadi is, oh, she's the one who said Ande ka putra andha, which does not happen in the epic, which does not happen even in the retelling. It happened in the news. It was a news article that while talking about uh, used this reference, and they named Draupadi as the one who um, called Duryodhan blind as the blind king's son. But that does not happen. It is actually Bhim who said Dhritarashtra Putra, or son of Dhritarashtra, and laughs at him. It's not even Draupadi present there to laugh at him. So a lot of blame has been put on Draupadi and women in general in mythology. If you were to change this story, how would you change it? What changes you would make? And the general question related to that is, who would you make the ruler? It can be anyone, doesn't matter who it is.
I feel in the entire Mahabharata, Draupadi has the most difficult life. I think she lives the most difficult life. Because it's just my perspective. I don't know, like being married to five, having five husbands, managing the entire household for them. Also, having been a princess, growing up as a princess, and then for a large part of her life, she had to live in forest. Even when she was married, they were living in forest. They did come back to Hastinapur, but then they, after the Game of Dragons and all, again went back to forest. So she did live a lot of her life in forest, and so I just feel that hers was the most difficult life of all. And yes, Bhishma too, I think he was wronged, but yeah. Coming back to your question about what would you like to change about Mahabharata? Off the top of my mind, I won't like to change anything because it is an epic. Why do you want to change anything about Mahabharata? It's so beautiful. It offers so many learnings, so many things to learn, and you can actually use them in your life. Like for example, Karna, you should not use you not allow your ego to dictate all your actions. And that is a big thing about Krishna and Arjun's friendship. I think that part where the author talks about Krishna and Arjun's friendship, I think that is such a uh, beautiful way she has portrayed like how friendships ideally should be. That is how their friendship was, and that is what something we should probably aim at. Of course, we are not Arjun or Krishna, but yeah, we could probably aim at something like that.
Draupadi should be the ruler and she should take the revenge, not her husband fighting for her. No. that would have been interesting for me. Because now people, so going down the line, people have taken that concept like woman is in danger and a man goes save her. Even in Ramayana also that's the case. Sita is in danger, Ram goes save her. Draupadi, something happened to Draupadi, her husband goes save her. So that just doesn't make any point. She has been suffered, then she should fight and she should rule the world. Yeah. And
Very
Yudhishthir, absolutely not him, because he just couldn't control himself by playing and uh, doing all the things. So Yudhishthir to nahi banna chahiye tha.
I don't know what I would change really, because there's just so many mistakes at every point in time, right from when Shantanu decides to marry Satyavati, that, I mean, in every generation they've done something or the other wrong. But then, okay, one thing if I would like to point, maybe if Dhritarashtra weren't so insecure about the throne, maybe, just maybe, he could have, yeah, generational trauma, true. So maybe he could have saved the kingdom, let all brothers, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, rule in peace. Maybe if Duryodhan had granted those 5 villages to the Pandavas when they asked, uh, maybe it could have stopped the war and everyone would have lived peacefully, but that wasn't going to happen. um, who rules? Then again, that's a very difficult question, because again, I don't see anybody really who's worthy of ruling the throne there. Just maybe apart from Bhishma, I'd say, because of the oath he couldn't, but it seemed like a sane person. And if from the Pandavas, if I have to choose, I'd say Arjun. Why? I have a reason for it. It might be a little controversial, but I would choose Arjun because he doubted himself at points, and I feel that should be a quality in a ruler. If you don't doubt yourself, if you are overconfident about whatever you decide, um, maybe that's not a great quality to, in a ruler. One should always learn to consult others, like Arjun consulted Krishna. Of course, he was like uh, too deep in doubt. Maybe he could tone it down a bit, but yeah, I feel that that is an essential quality, consulting others. So I'd say Arjuna should have ruled.
That's a very, very nice point. That reminds me of the exchange between Tywin Lannister and Tommen Lannister in Game of Thrones. You have Tywin asking Tommen. He gives example. He first asks question: how should a king be? Then when Tommen responds, he should be strong. Then he gives an example of a strong king that met his end. Then he gives the answer kind, and then he's met with another example of a kind king who meets his end. Then finally he settles on the answer that he should be wise. And then Tywin Lannister explains that yes, a king should be wise and he should gain experience from the people who are there to advise And I believe being wise comes from doubting yourself, doubting the situations every time. I wouldn't say doubt, I would say curiosity. Doubting is, yeah, doubting happens in the Mahabharata, where Arjun really doubts if he should go ahead with the entire war. But what he learns in return is what we consider the most valuable scripture, that is Bhagavad Gita. So yeah, Arjun would have made a good king with the help of Krishna.
I'll just won't let Ashwathama go in the Pandav's camp and kill people after 18th day after Duryodhana is defeated. And as a second choice for king, Vidur. I think he was the wisest one.
Whether,
Yeah.
yeah, you have two very, very competent, very sane, in Shraddha's word, a very, very um, knowledgeable kings, or at least people, candidates in the form of Bhishma and Vidur, but you have them bound by their societal place. You have Bhishma, who has taken the oath of celibacy, and he's forsaken the throne, which is exactly why the entire Mahabharata even happens, if you were to point it out to a single point. Um, and then you have Vidur, who's basically he is also a suitor. Um, he is the he's the product or a progeny of a Kshatriya king and a Brahmin mother, Vaishya mother or Brahmin mother. I'm not entirely sure, but so he's a progeny of mixed varnas, which is why he's not eligible to perform either of the duties, which is why he's also not in the battlefield. But as I said, advice and advisors are very important, and Yudhishthir had Vidur as his main advisor, who we don't see it in serials, we don't see it in major plot point of the story whenever it's told, but Vidur is extremely important to the story, who always ends up helping Yudhishthir. The major factor, one of the incident, which is basically the Lakshagriha, where the Pandavas are about to be burnt by the Kauravas, to Yudhishthir in a code language, in a Mlecha language, that is the foreign language, and warns him. Even while speaking a foreign language, he's speaking in code, where he says one should be wary of fire. The animal always digs. These are the examples that he gives, and it really changes the factor of what would have happened in the Lakshagriha. Who's your favorite character and why?
I wouldn't say it's a favorite character, but a character that I feel for it's Ghatotkach, because I mean I think Bhim had him. I don't remember the name of the village when they I think killed Bakasur.
Ekachakra.
Ekachakra, yes. So, and I think he left Hidimba there, and then Ghatotkaч comes back only in the battle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've read anywhere what happens in between. Was Bhim really part of his life? But then he has such strong attachment, maybe with to him, such loyalty that he comes back to fight for the Pandavas and eventually gets killed. So I felt very sorry for him, like uh, maybe other sons of the Pandavas as well, but Ghatotkaч seems like a pretty, you know, pitiable character.
There's a perspective I read, a very beautiful thing. I think it comes in Yugant by Iravati Karve. It's another book that is in the form of essays related to Mahabharata. If you don't know about it, or if you haven't read it, I suggest you do that. It's a interesting insight into Mahabharata. There it basically says that the Kurus ruled and succeeded the throne with this law that the eldest in the generation would rule, which is why Arjun can stake his um, basically ask for a stake at the throne, that I am the eldest of the generation. So it doesn't matter if you're the son of the king, son of the current king. I still get to rule as the generation has passed. So that is how the whole debate about who should be the ruler starts. And if we were to see in the next generation, Ghatotkach is the first in line. So he's the eldest in the generation. And it is said that when Ghatotkach dies, Krishna literally gets down of the chariot and starts dancing in the middle of the battlefield, which is then termed as, for the safety of Arjun, that, oh, I was worried that Arjun would have been killed by Shakti, that is possessed by Karna. But there's an insight that is presented that Ghatotkach would have succeeded if the Pandavas had won, and a Rakshasa, half Rakshasa, would have become the king of the most powerful kingdom in the subcontinent. So Krishna's dance is for that reason than anything else. And that's a very, very interesting aspect.
I'll go with Abhimanyu. Think
Mhm.
I think he did not deserve to die the way he did, and I'm just like, why couldn't Arjun explain him the entire concept or entire theory, or the other story, where Arjun is telling how to enter a Chakravyuh to Subhadra and she falls asleep in between, like whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
Why couldn't she stay awake for the entire story? But yeah, his part, like, there, I remember in our book which we had for Mahabharata story, the in the pages which describe the war, the 13th day of the war had like most number of pages dedicated to it than compared to other, because it was such a significant event, and a lot how exactly everything happened, and the way he was surrounded by 7 warriors and then finally defeated and killed. I think I was very shocking and something which should not happen. But
Yeah. It's the first brutal death in the
yeah,
battlefield, so which is um, very, very interesting to read, and the way he fights, the way like he knocks down the son of Duryodhan even before he gets down and finally meets his end. And it's very interesting. You talk about the son of Arjun who fought for Arjun, and then Bharadwaj talks about the son of Arjun who fought against Arjun. If you don't know about Babruvahan is the son of Chitrangada, if I remember correctly,
yeah,
who's the princess of Manipur.
mhm,
And Arjun meets her in his first solo exile, where he's exiled into the forest for entering the chambers of Yudhishthira and Draupadi.
yeah,
Um, and that's when he fathers a child with Chitrangada. And after coming back after burning the Khandava, for the Rajasuya Yajna, uh, he travels to the northeast and meets Babruvahan as a warrior who's defending his own kingdom. But at the end, of course, Arjun wins, and he blesses Babruvahan and basically crowns him as a vassal king.
yeah.
So yeah, that's very interesting. Two sons of Arjun who have contributed very differently to his own personality and to the story. I am again and again reminded of Bahubali, because Bahubali is basically an adaptation of Ramayana and Mahabharata mixed. You have this exiled hero in the second part. You have this jealous brother, cousin, stepbrother, whatever relation they have. And then you have the father who's insecure and sort of crippled, which is why he's not fit to rule. And that Ballal Dev's father is basically a mixture of Shakuni and Dhritarashtra, where he's scheming together with his son. Yeah, Hum Saath Saath Hai is also Ramayana. Rajniti is very outrightly Mahabharata. There's an old 1984 film called Kalyug. Uh, Amazing star cast as Rekha and whatnot. It's a Sham Benegal film, if I'm not wrong. that is also based on Mahabharata. You have Mani Ratnam's Ravan as the flipped version of Ramayana. You have Ravan of SRK, which is also, it has elements of Ramayana. So yeah, those are the adaptations.
Finding relations, finding parallels about mythology of Mahabharata or Ramayana in movies or stories or whatever. I think at the end of the day, what they are is victory of good over evil. I think that would be a theme which will always be there. So no matter what movie or show you pick up, you will be able to associate some part of it with mythology.
Beauty of Mahabharata, you might say, that there is no one perpetrator, there is no one hero as well. You have heroes coming out in certain situations, you have villains coming out in certain situations. Um, um, we end up seeing this as a whole, and it becomes a very political novel once you realize this larger context, and you don't want to see a certain person winning or certain person as the hero as well.